A philosophy of faith and a way of life. I was driving home from here one Sunday, and I flashed on the front of our textbook, front of our book, that says, The Science of Mind, a philosophy of faith, a way of life. And I was like, I've never heard anybody address those three things. And then by the time I got home, the divine was saying, I brought this to your attention for a reason. I'm like, yeah, so I can hear somebody talk about those. And it's like, no, that'd be your job. Sometimes I want someone else to do things. It's just true. Why philosophy? What even is philosophy? Philosophy comes from two Greek words, philos and sophia. Philos is loving or the love of. Sophia is wisdom. So philosophy is the love of wisdom. And when we begin to really break that down, it's a different kind of love than we have for our pets. It's a different kind of love than we have for one another. It is an all-pervasive love that takes over our being. It takes it over from the standpoint that nothing else takes first place. That becomes our sole first priority, searching out that wisdom. And so then we go to, what is wisdom? And many of us in our Western upbringing confuse wisdom with being smart. And then sometimes we confuse wisdom with being smart for a lot of years. That's not what we're talking about. The wisdom that we're talking about is the inviolate wisdom. That wisdom that has been examined every way it can possibly be examined, questioned with an intentional attempt to disprove it. And so when every effort has been made to disprove it, and we find that we can't disprove it, that's wisdom. It's synonymous with truth. And we know truth when we hear it because it resonates with our being. Truth has a vibration. Wisdom has a vibration. Okay. I am blessed to be in a philosophy class right now. And the connections are amazing. I see, those of you who may not be really familiar with our founder, Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes studied everything he could get his hands on. Everything. He went back and read and read and read. And the gift that he brought us was synthesizing all of this information into a format that our Western minds could wrap around. Because some of the fragments from this early pre-Socratic philosophy, you have to read them a couple of hundred times before you go, oh. Because they spoke differently than we do. But let's start all the way back with a fellow called Xenophanes. And Xenophanes was literally the first Greek thinker that dared to apply reasoning and coherence to question God's nature. Okay? Here's what Xenophanes had to say. See if it sounds familiar. God is one, supreme among gods and men, not at all like mortals in body or in mind. It is the whole that sees, the whole that thinks, the whole that hears. Without effort, it sets everything in motion by the thought of its mind. Sound familiar? That's how far back our teachings go. The very first Greek philosopher who bothered to say, what is this God thing? Now, how that all begins to evolve is by questioning what we see and what we experience and putting it in the framework of truth. Does it hold up? Does Rafe, being the truth of Rafe as a man standing on a stage in a suit, is that the truth of me? No. Because the same Rafe this morning at 6 o'clock got out of a bed in Fair Oaks wearing a pair of gym shorts. Same Rafe. So if I define my Rafe by this, and then I acknowledge that I've ever worn anything else, it doesn't hold up to truth. It's not who I am. It's the package I'm showing up in at the moment. How you showed up here today is an experience. It is so not the truth of who you are. You are so much greater than this expression. And this is what philosophy takes us to. Moving up, Xenophanes was the teacher of Parmenides. And Parmenides took it to a whole new level. Parmenides took it to really calling out the difference between who we are and who we think we are. Okay? And Parmenides' language gets a little bit challenging, but just hang with it. Never shall it be proven that not being is. Just take that in. Never shall it be proven that not being is. What he's saying there is that all the things that we look at and go, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, isn't even part of the equation. That's how we separate ourselves. Okay? Because we can't even have a real discussion about something that not is when there's one that simply is. There can be no not in it, is what he's telling us. From that path of inquiry, restrain your mind. In today's terms, don't even go there. Okay. Do not let custom, born of everyday experience, tempt your eyes to be aimless, your ear and tongue to be echoes. What he's telling us is about conditioned thinking and how it separates us from what is. He's telling us, don't be fooled by appearances. Don't repeat everything you hear. Don't be an echo. Okay? Because what is simply is. All that other stuff has no reality. It's just a distraction. It renders us aimless, very much like he says. Let reason be your judge when you consider this much disputed question. He's talking about what is. Let reason be your guide. Think it through. The heart, when left to itself, misses the road. And what he's telling us there is that we have to use our minds with our hearts. Don't use one without the other. They're both required. Okay? Because that's how we begin to reason. That love, that insatiable search for truth, is the impetus that pushes us, that moves us into the investigation. And then we have to use our reason. Does it make sense? Is it true? Or can I disprove it? Okay. He goes on to reiterate again, "Come then, listen to my word and take heed of it. I will tell you of two roads of inquiry which offer themselves to the mind. The one way that it is and cannot not be." I love you, Parmenides. "Is the way of credibility based on truth. The other way, that it is not, and that not being must be, cannot be grasped by the mind."
Yeah.
That's the part where I went, oh, thank God. Because that's hurting me. "For you cannot know not being and cannot express it." Okay? Take that last one in there for a minute. You cannot know not being and cannot express it. What we know in science of mind is exactly this in different words, that everything is the divine. There's no way to express something that's not it, because it is all there is. So when we look out and we see behaviors or we see belief systems that we want to say that's not God, doesn't work. Because if all there is the one, all is pretty pervasive, folks. We don't get any special categories of not in what is. This is what Parmenides is teaching us. Okay. In our teaching, we have a phrase called hidden beliefs. Here's the good news and the bad news. There really are no hidden beliefs. Not one of your beliefs is hidden. That's the good news. The bad news, maybe, depending on you, is every belief you have shows up in your life. It shows up as your life. So if you think they're hidden, just look at your life. It is a living, breathing example of what you believe. Which takes us to this lovely word called responsibility. And I don't know about you, but while I accept it, there are moments when I don't want it. I would much rather someone else be responsible, because then it's somebody else's fault and then I don't have to do it, and then I can go back to that peaceful little place inside my human experience that if you would fix yourself, I'd be just fine. And the truth of the matter is, nothing's broken. Nothing's broken. I just don't like what you're doing. Or I don't like what I'm doing. This begins to give us a roadmap to how to unravel that. The second road that Parmenides is talking about, interestingly enough, falls under the title of the way of opinion. And I'm just going to read this one brief thing because we're going to go into that in more detail with Socrates. "They have distinguished the thought forms as opposed in character and as having properties which set them apart from each other." Opinions are the foundation of separation. When we begin to falsely identify one another based on opinions, we have forgotten that there's only one of us here. Only one. What is. So when we start going down that road of things that are not, Parmenides is telling us, I warned you not to go down that road. It's the road of separation. It's the road of false inquiry. Come back to what is. Come back to one, is what he's telling us. Now, interestingly enough, Parmenides happened to be Socrates' teacher. And if you know anything about Socrates, he was put to death for being a philosopher. If you're prone to read philosophy at all, I highly recommend the great dialogues of Plato, especially the Apology, because it's about Socrates' trial. And Socrates' apology is a different understanding of the word apology as we understand it. In the Greek time, the apology was simply his defense. And interestingly enough, Socrates didn't defend himself, but rather gave a really eloquent dialogue that more profoundly convicted him than his accusers. And why would he do such a thing? The love of wisdom. Because to do anything other than that would have been to compromise truth. And he wouldn't do it. Okay? He was accused of corrupting the youth and believing in gods other than the Greek gods that were sanctioned by the state. He started his apology, his defense, recognizing that he has two accusers, the current accusers and what he called the early accusers. And the majority of his dialogue is about those early accusers. And what he's talking about are the prejudices that were built against him over time by people's opinions. And that the people that were 501 person jury that was charged with the responsibility of his guilt or innocence, he asked them to even forget about that. He asked them to determine if his plea was just. He didn't care about guilt or innocence because he recognized that guilt and innocence was based on falsehood, was based on opinion, wasn't based on truth. He was interested in what is just. And he articulated that these are the things that I have done. And people who have never met me have talked about me because I threatened the power structure. I threatened the religious structure by telling the truth. Okay. The vote was very close, and I don't have those exact details, but it was way closer than Socrates expected it to be. He was convicted, and in Greek law at that time, the accusation had to come with a proposed penalty, and so his accusers had proposed his death. They get 2 votes. They vote on guilt or innocence, and then the accused, if found guilty, proposes their own sentence. And then the jury votes on that, whether it's the initial sentence that was proposed or whether it's the accused sentence that was proposed. So Socrates' proposal for his sentence, having been found guilty, was that he be housed and cared for in the town hall, which was reserved for dignitaries. The most anyone was allowed to spend there was 24 hours. And Socrates suggested punishment for being found guilty was to be housed in the town hall and cared for, clothed, fed, everything taken care of at the state's expense for the rest of his life. Why would he propose such a thing? Because he could have said, look, you found me guilty, I'll leave. I'll move away. I won't do philosophy anymore. Because that's really what they wanted. They didn't really want to kill him. They wanted him to shut up. Okay. Why wouldn't he do that? The love of wisdom. Because to do that would be to say what I'm doing is wrong. To do that would be to say truth isn't really truth. He refused to bring his family in to testify on his behalf to gain any favor from the court. And he again reiterated in his final summation that I've told the truth and you don't like it. And for that I'm going to die. And I'm okay with that. I hope you're okay living with killing me for telling the truth. In essence, is what he said. Continuing to bring that forward, the crucifixion of Jesus has a lot of similarities. Falsely accused. What was he accused of? Claiming to be something he wasn't. Did he ever actually do that? No. And the basis for the his accusations against Jesus were, again, the big one was he was disturbing the money flow to Caesar. He was disturbing the balance of power. Because that's what truth does. That's what truth does. That's why we talk about speaking truth to power. Okay. Jesus was brought before, same deal, refused to defend himself. And when asked to, he simply responded, I didn't say that, that's what you said. You said that about me, I didn't say it. Brought him before another judge, same thing. Did you say da-da-da-da? This is what you've said. You said this. So, Brother Ernest pulled all that together. And he points to the brilliance of that. There's, in the first part of our Science of Mind book, there's a lot of references to philosophy and how he begins to tie all that together. On page 68, the first paragraph, deep thinkers of antiquity, as well as the philosophers of all ages, have meditated long and earnestly upon the nature of the divine being, knowing that there could be but one ultimate reality back of all things. They have pondered deeply as to the nature of that reality. And it is significant that most of the great thinkers have arrived at similar conclusions. See, truth stands the test of time. Truth stands the examination. And so I would invite you, test what your brain is telling you. See if it's true in your mind. Because your brain and your mind don't always agree. Okay. I'll bring it back to this week. There were things where my brain was telling my human experience that this is bad. My mind anchored in truth. How is that possible? Where is bad? In love, where is it? See, it's an opinion. It's an experience. It's a human definition. It ain't the truth. And our invitation, our journey, is to daily wrestle, because we're all raised steeped in conditioned thinking. Our thinking is conditioned for us before we even know what a thought is. We're born into conditioned thinking. So let's just accept that. We don't need to point fingers at anybody for conditioning us, because it's just part of the human experience. And if we can move our human experience from an either or to a both and, that we are fully spirit, having a fully human experience. Both and. Then we can come together with that coherence of truth. Then we don't have to vilify ourselves and one another. It's just how the divine is showing up. Will I allow myself to see love in everything? Because it's there. Will I let myself see it? Let's take this into prayer. Divine isness that can only be. The one infinite, ever-present source. Living, moving, having its being as all life. Showing up in this incredibly diverse myriad of forms. All of it infused in every element of its creation, from the tiniest microscopic representation of itself to the greatest wonders of the world, all the one. And all of the space in between the one. No beginning, no end, no circumference. Infinite. And yet its very center is everywhere present. This is our life. This is the magnificence of our being. This is the available reality. And so in this truth, I realize in this moment a stepping into that truth for each of us. The activity this week of seeing reality, of seeing love, of seeing truth in every situation. And as we allow ourselves to see it, we allow ourselves to feel it. We allow for that deep resonation within our being that says, I know who I am. I know who I am. And as I know who I am, I know who you are. Because we're one. Grateful for this opportunity to be in service. Grateful to allow Spirit to move through me as me. Experiencing itself as this amazing center that I know is Mountainside Center for Spiritual Living. And so from this gratitude, I release my word, because the words make it so in the law. It's already done. I let it be. And so it is.